Step into the unknown with Paranormal M. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay updated with our latest perplexing stories. We hope you have a thought-provoking time. My one and only OBE. To start this off, I was young when this happened. Very young. But I can still remember it so vividly. My family and I used to live on the top half of a 2-apartment duplex. My dad was at work, Mom was asleep, as well as me and my 2 brothers. My oldest brother woke up to the smell of smoke, so he went and woke my mom. At first she blew it off and kept dismissing him, but once she began to actually slip into consciousness, she could smell the smoke very strongly, prompted her to get up. Turns out the apartment downstairs had caught fire. We needed to evacuate immediately. So my mom got to waking us. Everybody was in a panic, and this is when shit got weird. Before I go any further, I need to elaborate something for this to really make sense. This apartment was haunted. There's been many unexplained paranormal experiences happening, such as voices speaking in tongues, and saying things like my dad's name through a speaker that wasn't even plugged in, the microwave reading 666 when we started attending Sunday school, my best friend, or rather befriending, of a young girl who was very obviously dead. In hindsight, she was deathly pale, always covered in bruises, and all of us experiencing a nefarious male presence that radiated malice, to name some of the few examples. So my mom's standing at the front door. She's ushering us out and down the stairs. I was last in line and heading for the door when I heard my name whispered in one of the bedrooms. I turned and looked. I tried to look through the smoke. I could see the male presence beckoning me to come to him. This is when I left my body. Like I was hovering above myself and literally watching myself as I stretched my arms out in front of me and started robotically walking toward the room, which, mind you, was beginning to sort of sport flames at this point. Suddenly, my mom screamed my name. I snapped back into my body and was standing not even 10 feet from the burning room. I remember becoming hysterical and running to my mom, like I was beyond scared by whatever had just happened. Never really knew how to explain it until my teen years. That's when I discovered OBEs, and I'm pretty certain that's what I experienced. Obviously, we moved after that. The duplex got rebuilt and then a few years later burned down again. Remained an empty lot after that. Now, I cannot confirm this, and I have no idea if it's actually true, but I was talking with my mom about this one day years after the fact. It was when I was much older. She said that she'd been told that a man used to live in that house before it was made into a duplex. He was not a good man by any means. This man had a daughter and he was allegedly very abusive towards her. Apparently, the man had ended up killing his daughter, and then subsequently took his own life. Same voice whispering names. When I was younger, I used to hear a woman's voice, not only shout whispering my name, but my brother's names as well. More so theirs than mine. One instance, I was with my brother E. We were looking through our VHS collection to find something to watch. That's when I heard the woman whisper his name. He didn't seem to hear it. Another time I was walking down the hall at school. Class was going, so nobody else was around. I heard that same voice whisper my name. I turned around to see if it was a friend or somebody I knew, but nobody was there. The freakiest instant, I'd stayed home from school one day I had a cold. I was lounging in my mom's bed reading a Goosebumps book. Across the room on a tall dresser, she had one of those touch lamps that would get brighter with each touch, and after the 3rd tap it would turn off. Out of nowhere, the lamp just turns on by itself. I look up at it and I stare at it for a minute when it happens again and the light gets brighter. Then it happens again and again until it goes off. Keep staring at it for a minute or so, and when nothing else happens, I go back to reading my book. Then it'll happen again, going through each level of brightness until it turns off again. Right after it turned off, it sounded like, and I shit you not, somebody crawling across the floor on the other side of the bed, and then that same female voice harshly whispers my brother's name. I immediately jumped up, launched myself off the bed and onto the door before running to the living room and putting on SpongeBob to help calm my nerves. It hasn't happened in years, though, but it used to happen a lot. That last incident, however, that genuinely spooked me so much that it's literally burned into my mind. I'll never forget the sheer panic I felt when I heard something crawling across the damn floor. Anybody experience anything similar? Ask Reddit. One day, my girlfriend and brother and I were on our way to a dog shelter in a rural area. We wanted to go play and interact with their rescues and drop off some donations. So we get kind of lost and start down a dirt road leading to the woods. We don't know the area at all. It's midday, so the sun's out and there's no people around, so the drive is, pretty. We're just joking and laughing and enjoying the scenery. As we round a bend in the road, we see an old house with unkept lawn and some broken cars out front, but no obvious signs of people living there. We're still in a good mood and making jokes about the hills of eyes. That's the sort of vibe the house is giving off. But we decided it's best to turn around, and the shelter's clearly not on this road. We follow the road another 10 meters or so to get a clearing behind the house so I can turn around. As we drive past the backyard, we can see the whole yard is full of mannequins. Old, sun-damaged mannequins in all shapes and sizes. Some with clothing, but most just naked and broken. I can't describe how incredibly unsettling this was. There had to be over 50 of them, some without heads, some with only partial heads, and most of them had limbs missing. Some were propped up in kind of strange but very specific positions that had to have been done by somebody deliberately. Some of them were just laying about like they were clearly dropped there ages ago and never touched again. Just a whole yard full of disfigured mannequins in the middle of the woods. Everybody in the car went dead quiet right away. All the joking stopped immediately. I locked the doors and rolled up the windows and started to turn the car around. I told my brother to keep an eye out for the house and my girlfriend to keep an eye on the woods, just to make sure no one was near. Just as I turned around, my brother says, "Someone's looking at us through the curtains." I think that was the most single frightening moment of my life. As we passed the house, the door opened and a middle-aged lady comes out and starts walking towards us. She walked right up to the road, and as we approached her with the car, she seemed quite friendly. She gestured for us to stop and roll down her windows, which I actually did. Turns out a lot of people just get lost, and they're looking for the animal shelter like I was. And she was very politely giving us directions. We thanked her and followed her directions, which turned out to be correct. She's just a lady who lives in the woods and collects mannequins. Scared us shitless, though, and I still get the creeps when I walk into that store with dolls. My family home in the UK is old, and many accounts of supernatural experiences. My family home is called the Jolly Anglers. We moved in when I was 1 year old in 1978, and parts of it goes back to medieval times as a wayside hovel. Still has the original Ingle Nook fireplace. It was in a public house, or rather it was a public house or a guest house for many years before we moved in. I'll add a picture of it. So, the earliest record of it that I've managed to find is in 1841. It's from the census. That's when William Rivet is the innkeeper. It was acquired by Stewart and Pattison from Farrier and Company. That was in 1884, and was still an S&P brewery pub when it served its final pint in 1952. At some point between 1901 and 1911, the Angel changed its name to the Jolly Anglers, possibly coinciding with a change in landlord. We think the poet Jesse Pope, who moved to Fritton Village after he married in 1929. Maybe referenced it in her collection of verses, entitled Three Jolly Anglers, published in 1913. In the 1900s, they also added on a tea room. Over the years, my mom could have and should have written a book about the paranormal happenings at the house that many of us experienced, and have had 3 different paranormal investigating teams visit this house. I'll take and upload pictures of historical features when I'm over there tomorrow. Dad built an indoor pool that was in 1988. Found many seashells deep down when it used to be linked by the sea. Had a small jetty and boats used to moor up to visit it. It's now in the middle of the countryside, and over the years waters receded over a mile away in the distance, but many years ago the sea linked into the lake nearby, and in medieval times was largely dug and then it would extract peat for burning. The village where the house resides seems to have been known to our Roman heritage, for in a small hillock lying about half a mile north of the lake near to our house, people always want to hear the paranormal side of my parents' house, which was part medieval wayside hovel, then inn, and then a pub after that, Norfolk, UK. So I've written some of the strange things that have happened at my parents' house, the Jolly Anglers. Where do I start? Well, we moved into the house in 1978, and in the first 6 months, Mom was in tears and wanted to leave again as she was scared to death of all the strange happenings. Dad was working way offshore at the time, and they'd used all their money to buy the old house, so they knew they couldn't just up and leave. Dad wasn't one for giving in, but he also wasn't one for living it daily. Half the time, it was just my mom, and I was a 9-month-old, and my older siblings were 15 and 17. Now, they say teenage energy can cause spirits to be active in houses, and it affects them. So maybe that could have been why they all saw a lot when I was a baby in the house. One night, Mom was in bed and I was in the cot in the same room, and she woke up and heard rustling coming from the staircase. The staircase is open and goes straight into their bedroom. She then in the dim light saw a black shadow floating up the stairs and move very slowly to my cot. She was in shock and couldn't move for a while and watched it float across the room. As the figure leaned into my cot, Mom was petrified, put the side light on in a panic. The shadow just disappeared. She said the noise sounded like crinoline dresses, how the material rustled as like somebody walked along, maybe in like the Victorian area. Another time, my parents also, whilst in bed, heard an old honky-type piano play downstairs and cigar smoke and voices several times in the first 6 months of living there. And note, Dad always went down to investigate with his double-barrel shotgun, but everything went silent whenever he opened the door at the bottom of the stairs. They lived with daily bangs, strange voices, knocking, and footsteps. This was all throughout their lives, and also others, like myself and my siblings, have heard these. This is on a pretty regular basis. My brother and a friend of his, whilst in a lounge one evening, saw the start of what looked like a red woman's dress coming down one set of stairs in the old area which was originally the pub. The pub area is my parents' best lounge, and it was once 2 rooms, but my dad knocked them both into one big one. When it was the pub, it was like a smoking room and the other was like a bar room, which still has a bar in it, but not the original one. My father purchased it from an old retired landlord of a demolished pub in Great Yarmouth. This room has a staircase. Each end one staircase goes into my parents' bedroom. The other staircase, the opposite end, goes up into a small hall, and off of that are 2 bedrooms. One was my brother's, the other was my sister's. But I slept in there with her frequently. My parents built a small bedroom downstairs, which was a section of the larger bathroom, which, decades before it was called the parlor room, not the bathroom. We do know from history records that one of the landlord's children many years ago died in the house of tuberculosis, a young girl, about 8 years old. My aunt used to sleep in the old small bedroom when she was visiting us, and one evening was petrified when she saw what looked like flickering candles moving out of the doorframe. On another occasion, she heard breathing which sounded raspy, and a female crying. She ended up sleeping in my brother's room and refused to stay in my little bedroom after the 2 events. Tins in the kitchen have flown out of the cupboards, dented the radiator. Pictures have flown off the walls and also somehow landed on other ends of the room, not just dropped downwards. Small dancing white lights have been witnessed by several people in different areas of the house, also seen by the paranormal research team. All teams have picked up things and seen things, even been poked by an entity. Psychic mediums have come to the house and said that there are many spirits, including a woman who had several children, drowned herself. One young man with a clubfoot who lived at the pub, and in those days would have been called an imbecile, who owned a black dog and haunts the house too. My mom later investigated documents to this claim, and she saw in the 1899 census that, in fact, a man classed as an imbecile was residing at the residence. Now, before the psychic talked about the woman when I was a little girl about 3, my parents tell me I had an invisible friend. Apparently she was a lady in a red dress, so I said, and she used to push me on the swing outside. I used to talk to her and she'd play with me and my toys a lot. I said she was a nice lady that liked children, but years later a neighbor from the village was at one of our parties, talking about the history of her family. Apparently they had lived in our village for many years, and she had been doing some family research and had recently found out that her great-grandmother had been pulled out of the lake which is near our house. She apparently had drowned herself because twins were prevalent in her family. She had 2 sets and was pregnant again. Her husband had recently died and she couldn't take it anymore. She was very poor and, well, I took the body from the river and they didn't have a funeral home in those days. So they always laid the bodies out in a cold place, which is normally the local pub cellar, where in fact she was laid out to be buried in our local pub cellar and held in the post-mortem there too. She had documents, which, funnily enough, was my playroom as a child in the freezer storage area. Now, no one knows if she died wearing a red dress, but it was, well, apparently she loved children by the psychic, so everybody thinks that, well, that's the lady in the red dress that was my invisible friend as a child. There was an incident once where a family friend's child was over with his mom and his 3-year-old. They go and open doors and they investigate. Fortunately, he opened the cellar door, fell to the bottom. Now, there are big concrete steps to the bottom of the cellar. My father saw him enter the cellar, but didn't see him fall. But when he rushed in, just to see if he could see him, he saw him standing at the bottom of the steps, not even crying. They all checked him over and said, "Are you okay?" He said, "The lady got me." Pointed to an area in the cellar. Apparently gave everybody their goosebumps. Another occasion at the party was there's a non-believer there who was joking about ghosts and what people had seen. Said to the group of people that it's a load of old nonsense. The moment he said that, the old heavy wooden front door creaked open. No one was there behind it. Apparently he went very pale and flustered. Many people witnessed that. Also, people have seen figures in the corner of their eye or movement for years. We all got used to the footsteps, taps, and bumps as it was an old house and it had a lot of people walk through it. It ended up just being a thing you got used to. Mom didn't leave after 6 months. Dad convinced her to stick it out and things did calm down, but never completely stopped. When my grandmother died, my father saw her sitting at the end of the bed looking at her daughter. When I was very ill as a child in bed, I saw a man in a black suit, which I thought was the doctor. Started talking to him, asking where my mom was, and he disappeared. One of my nieces has seen a lady sitting in an old velvet chair in one of the bedrooms. My other grandmother, when she stayed over once, heard what sounded like rings being dropped into the sink, as all the bedrooms have a sink in it. It used to be a guest house. As a teenager, I moved from my sister's old room into my brother's old room at the back of the house, and one night I woke to see a very tall man in a black cape. We have no streetlights in the village, and I never shut my curtains as, we're not overlooked. So the moonlight was coming through my window. He must have been 6'5". His head nearly reached the ceiling. I could see in the light he had fair hair which was slicked back and parted at one side, but he didn't move. It was like a picture in a picture book. I couldn't help but be quite mesmerized for a few seconds on how clear it was. But I lost that feeling, suddenly jumped up and ran out of the room. Didn't even bother putting a light on. I just woke my parents up, burst into tears, and really shook me up. After that event, I even changed the layout of my room so I wouldn't wake up in that position again. Another time I woke up and I heard loud footsteps going around the bend. But strangely, the footsteps were like heavy boots, and they were at like my ear level, not on the ground. To this day, I still find that very strange. They sounded amplified, too. Like another time, a man with straggly long hair poked his head out from one of the sloped ceilings of my room. Each time, I'd shoot out of the room and sleep in the other bed for a few days before I felt safe enough to go back and sleep. Me and my husband and our 2-year-old daughter left at 4 in the morning once. We did this after a family wedding because my daughter was crying. My husband picked her up out of the cot bed and she pointed to a corner near the stairs and said, "Man there." She has autism and her speech was delayed at that age, but she was physically scared of something that she didn't settle there, which was very unusual for her. It scared my husband, so we said, "We're going home now." When we got to her home, she slept peacefully. I believe the spirit was being a nuisance to her. One of my mom's best friends was spiritual, told me that I had a gift, and that I saw spirits. Something I never really wanted, and it scared me every time, even in my own house, grown with a daughter. I have a husband too, and I'm pretty, I guess you could just say I'm scared that my own people that I see. Every time I see them, I think it's an intruder before ever thinking it's a spirit, and I always go into the, fight not flight part. I run at them, and I always end up running into my bedroom door. My dad has been dead 15 years, and when he died at a home in bed, and the house was very active again for a while. But my father built a lot of new parts of the house with his own hands, so we all knew he would have put a lot of energy there when he passed. Mom now on her own at the house. She'll be 80 in 2022. She now has limited mobility, but she's very stubborn and has no intention of leaving. It's far too big for her to cope with, but she has a gardener and a cleaner, and I help with a lot of shopping. She says when she leaves this house, it will be in a coffin. My daughter's 11. She stays with her nan every Friday night. It's her routine. And Mom loves having her, and she stays a few days a week when it's summer holidays and school holidays, and she loves the house. But I feel that she is spiritual too. She can sense things, but it doesn't bother her to sleep on her own in my sister's old room next to my mom's, and till about a year ago, she told my mother that she had seen her granddad in my mother's room where she slept on occasions. She asked her questions like, what does she like to do? And after that, she now sleeps downstairs, which is now where my mother sleeps also now due to the mobility. Well, that's some of the stories anyways. There's many more, but these are the ones I can remember off the top of my head. Other experiences. A friend saw a bearded gentleman's face reflected as she passed by a mirror. Mom saw a grotesque male face in gray, similar to what Satan may look like for a split second in her own reflection. It was in the mirror in the bedroom hallway. I heard my music box drawer just click open and the music started playing when I was trying to go to sleep one night as a child. I removed it from my room after that, and my mother also had heard that too. I had China dolls in my room when I was a young teen, and once one of their arms flopped down, got my dad to remove them. They're still in the hallway on a shelf. One night, Mom felt really hot trying to sleep. She felt the heating was on too high, so went to turn the heating down, and the thermostat was in the lounge downstairs. As she went to the thermostat, she suddenly saw the door to the lounge opening. All were asleep upstairs, and she said she ran up so fast up the stairs that she ran out to the top of the nightdress and ripped it. She was shouting when she ran upstairs to my sister to grab me out of the cot and get into my brother's bedroom when they barricaded the door with his wardrobe and didn't sleep at all that night. That was till morning when they all investigated together. Apparently, my brother complained and said that it's roasting hot up here. And she replied with, "You'll have to bloody sweat as I'm not going down till morning." Going up to bed one night, she's turning off all the lights in the lounge. She had a gold latch that she used to flip down to secure the door in the lounge to the rest of the house. One night after she had done, she had walked to the stairs and she suddenly heard the latch flip up and the door slowly opened. Another scarper up the stairs, perhaps scamper, locked the door behind her and put covers over her face. All the bedrooms have either key locks or bolts on the inside of every bedroom due to, travelers visiting the pub years ago to rent a room for the night if they wanted to as guests. Mom very much appreciated the locks and bolts, as she did think it was mostly intruders to start with. It's funny when you look back on it all and you think to yourself, spirits can get through locked doors and bolted doors, but at the time it makes you feel really safe and secure that they'll stay behind a locked door, and funny enough, most of the time they did. Many times my dad was armed with his shotgun, quietly sneaking around the house after hearing bangs and bumps and knocks. It's a big house with many steps, levels, and twists and turns, so it could take him a while to do a sweep search of the house. Mom said she was always so relieved when he came back up to bed and said, "No one's broke in." But they both were always equally perplexed on what the noise was when they heard it in the first place. Paranormal investigators, along with Mom and her teenage grandson, witnessed all the glasses in the bar, which are stored upside down, start to all clink together several times. Years later, they went from a latch lock in the lounge area to a battery-operated alarm door lock, so if it's switched on and a door opens, an alarm sounds. And she set this up religiously. In the middle of the night, she heard the smoke alarm go off. When she went down, half asleep and groggy, to investigate, she couldn't smell any smoke. So she got a stool and checked the smoke alarm, and in her groggy sleep state, she suddenly realized the noise was coming from the door which had been opened. She hastily shut the door and used deadbolt and ran upstairs. Mom was hiding behind the bar one morning after a family party that we had the night before. That's when she felt something or somebody grab her shoulder. There was no one there. There was a small American Indian doll high up on the bar, and it's still there. One day my parents noticed I was playing with it as a toddler. They say there was no way possible that I would have been able to get that myself, and they said, "How'd you get that from down there?" I apparently said, "The lady gave it to me." So many to recall, but these are some throughout the 46 years of my life. And here's one more to add. Many lights started to flicker for over a month after his death, like touch lamps especially. Also, the solar lights outside the back door used to go off and on, and we sat and watched them several times. Spoke to my dad, sure that he was trying to communicate with us. Many lights started to flicker for over a month after his death. Also, the solar lights outside the back door used to go off and on, and we sat and watched them several times and spoke to Dad. Tall, dark figure in the woods. I'm new to this stuff, and I'm not too interested in going too deep into it. Not expecting anybody to believe me, but I wanted some answers or theories on what I saw. So a few weeks ago, I was cruising down some back roads with a friend. That's when he decided to take a small road off the main one. It was one lane and covered by trees, and about half a mile down the road, we started getting cold chills and feeling uneasy. We got to the end, which was a bridge and a driveway barely wide enough for my Jeep, and looked like it was about to fall into the creek. Decided to go back up into a turnaround spot and get out there when I got the feeling to turn around and look back again. It's about 20 feet away. 7-footish skinny figure that looked like somebody threw a dark black blanket over themselves, moving slowly and smoothly toward my friend's side of the Jeep. Whatever it was got pelted with gravel, and we almost crashed a few times while I was going 85 down the road. Once we got back on the main road, my friend realized that we were crossing the bridge on the main road where somebody offed their head a few days ago. What really messes me up is that he didn't see it, and it was going towards him. Anyway, if anybody could tell me what y'all think, it'd be appreciated. can't sleep because of this. It's been some time since I have experienced unexplainable events. Today it happened, something I never experienced before. My partner was gone for work already, and because of the quarantine rules in our country as of right now, I'm at home, and after a few hours I decide to sleep for a while on the couch. Please take the time to finish reading the story, because I never experienced sleep paralysis, and this wasn't like the stories I've read. What happened was the following. I was inside this dream, having a vacation. I actually was fully into the dream, and I suddenly woke up. I heard these noises coming from the couch. That's why I was completely awake without opening my eyes just yet. You know that feeling where you just wake up and keep your eyes closed for a bit? Well, the first thing I thought clear as day when I heard those noises was, this isn't my partner, which motivated me to keep my eyes closed and listen. As if I could open them at any time, I was fully aware. It was really strange. It sounded like somebody was lying on or sitting on the couch with me. It was an L-shaped couch. It had just enough room for two people to lay on it. It was like how my partner would sound, like turning around, breathing, and making, living noises. A lot of things went through my mind. I couldn't have slept for that long because I have a good night rest and my partner definitely left for work. He isn't home, and I was certainly supposed to be alone. Burglar went through my mind next. Really sounded like somebody was in the room with me for sure. Tried to wake me up. Heard it standing up after a while, and I heard it come closer to me. This was the creepiest of all, which made me realize this wasn't a burglar at all. I guess I was awake for 30 seconds already, listening to these noises, being frighteningly close beside me. It then imitated my partner's voice as if it was my partner. Tried to trick me or something. Really close to my face, it said, "Hey babe," it scared me to death. Because of this isn't my partner thoughts. I had these straight away when I woke up and I kept my eyes closed. It sounded like him exactly, like a super romantic version of him trying to wake me. Really, this felt more than creepy. Like I felt a kiss on my head, and I only think I'm not falling for this. I don't fall for this. Don't open your eyes, it's not him, it's not real, and within a second it sat on top of me. Felt like the weight of it, like a really large human. I was really scared because then I knew 1000% for sure this couldn't be my partner. He wouldn't sit on top of me like that. The way it moved from beside the couch on top of me was unnatural and too fast. Tried to stay calm and tried to move a part of my arm to test out if I still could. I couldn't move a thing, which does suggest sleep paralysis. This is the only thing that sounded the same to me, and believe me, I tested moving myself before I laid down and I couldn't always move myself. When the weight started to get heavier and heavier to the point that I lost my breathing completely, I finally dared open my eyes, confronting whatever it was. And yep, nobody was there. My partner came home 4 hours later. The thought that one night or day my partner will wake me up and it just isn't him at all, and I might fall for this and open my eyes, scares me to death right now. The imagination of what this could have been or could have looked like. I can't sleep because of this. My imaginary friend tried to kill me. When I, a 27-year-old trans man, was little, between 2.5 and 5 years, I had an imaginary friend, Amy. Many kids have imaginary friends, so the more I've learned about Amy, the more I worry about what it could have been, or if my imagination was just different from other kids. The only memory I have of her is a dream that I remember pretty vividly. I remember racing around the town I lived in to go to different hospitals because Amy was having surgery. I don't know what the surgery was, but I remember feeling a deep sense of dread if I didn't make it to the hospital. I remember calling her on my jelly bean-filled playphone to find out what hospital to go to, hearing her voice and everything. As soon as my dad and I got to a hospital, she would tell me, no, not that one, you need to go to this one. She would direct me to another hospital on the other side of town. And this happened 3 times in the dream. When we got to the last hospital in town, I remember her telling me that I was at the wrong hospital again. I remember her saying, You're so useless. Couldn't even be here for the surgery when you know you were needed for it. I've no idea why I was needed. This is the only memory I have of Amy. Completely forgotten about her for the longest time until my mom brought her up one day. When I was 14, my family had just moved into a house at the pool, and when my sister and I were picking our rooms. I wanted one that overlooked the pool and backyard. My mom gave me a concerned look for a moment and asked what was wrong. She asked me if I remembered Amy. I looked at her confused, saying that I didn't. She told me that when I was little, my imaginary friend Amy wanted to go swim in the deep end of the pool when I was younger, before he knew how to swim. She wanted me to go play in the room, and the room I wanted not only overlooked the pool, but because it was only partially over the garage, it had a roof access. You had to just pop off the screen. When she told me this, I remembered the dream, and I remembered the person I was on the phone with, and it was Amy. Fast forward about 8 years, and I was drinking with my older sister and playing Truth or Dare. My sister asked me Truth or Dare, and since I didn't want to take a shot of vinegar, I said Truth. She asked me, "Did Amy really make you ask me to kill you?" I was shocked. I looked at her completely confused and asked her to repeat the question to make sure I heard it right. Told her I had absolutely no memory of this, or Amy aside from the one dream. A few days later, I asked her if I actually asked her to kill me when I was younger, and she told me yes. Told her Amy wanted me to ask her to kill me multiple times. I know that there were multiple times in my young years between 2.5 and 5 years old when I almost drowned due to either going into a deep end when I couldn't swim or simply walking to the pool and sitting on the bottom. So confused about what this could have been, or if it was just my imagination. What is this in my apartment? This started when I was still living with my parents. It's 2015, 2016. It was around 3 a.m. I don't remember the exact time, but it was between 3 and 3:30. Out of nowhere, there were these 3 knocks. Sounded like the noise was coming from underneath my couch storage. Let's call it that. This happened a few times. I had a cat at that time, but she wasn't in the room. Wouldn't have been able to knock so synchronously. Synchronistically, I want to say. This went on for a while. Sometimes it happened more often, sometimes less, but always around the same time, 3:30. Eventually it stopped altogether as far as I can remember. That was in 2022-23. When I moved out in 2023, I started searching for things in my apartment that have been missing to this day, like my new belly button piercings that I'd ordered. Strangely, I put one in before the others disappeared. My body rejected it directly. Eventually, I got used to things disappearing without a trace. My boyfriend then moved in with me, and I made jokes that I had a house ghost named Henry. Found objects in completely different places, and cabinets or doors were open when I was sure I'd closed them, or I wasn't even in the room. And suddenly the door was open. Couldn't be my cat because I was taking her with me. She always was with me in the room at the time. It was just my boyfriend. Once we were both sitting on the couch, I placed a glass on the table and we left the room with the cat, came back, and the glass was on the other side where it couldn't have been reached. About a month ago, I was home alone, lying in bed, and again I heard 3 knocks under the bed. At first, we accepted it and thought it was what it was, because nothing worse happened. But for a few weeks now, we've had a sewing kit on the balcony. My boyfriend sewed something, and it's been out on the small table in the corner since then. The needle was on the table, and it was not possible for the needle to move off of the table because it had a raised edge. So nothing can simply fall off. But a few times the needle was in the front of our chair, which is about half a meter diagonally across from the table. We kept putting the needle back onto the table, and still it would end up there. Today, my boyfriend told me that the needle was upright on the chair. It was stuck at an angle where the backrest and the seat are connected. He saw it, put it back, and I'm really starting to get scared. We both believe in such things and are both sure that it's not normal. My boyfriend's not messing with me because he would often do this during the instance. I hope somebody can help me. I don't even know how to explain this. Like an hour and a half ago, 9:30 p.m. for me, I left my dorm room on the 10th floor and went down to the 8th floor to mark my attendance, sign the attendance sheet, and then returned to my room to work on my homework. However, 1 hour later, the warden informed me that I hadn't signed the attendance sheet. I was so confused. Went downstairs again to check, and indeed my attendance was not marked. I looked at the names above and below mine to verify I hadn't mistakenly signed in their spaces either, as there were no overwrite pen marks. I clearly remember going downstairs to sign the attendance sheet. I now have a penalty. To prove I left my room, I even have a video recording I took of the view from our floor just outside my room. Plus, my roommates also saw me leave the room, and I'm so freaked out right now. Has anyone experienced this? I was serving tables in 2014, grave shift. The restaurant was on, quote-unquote, the boats, otherwise known as the casino. So this is a one-way in, one-way out situation. The only other door is a service door that waitstaff uses to go to the bathroom in the parking garage. That's because we aren't supposed to use the same one as the casino patrons. You have to go through the kitchen to get there, and he would have to pass me. Open the kitchen, I can always see the door and who's entering and leaving unless my back's turned. Beautiful man appears at the booth. Place is dead. Empty, maybe 3 or 4 a.m. Walk up thinking he slipped in and I wasn't looking, and I apologized if he had to wait. He tells me to sit. So I sit with him and entertain him a bit, but like I said, this man was beautiful. He then asks me about my spirituality and then tells me to take a piece of paper and write the 3 things I want most out of life. I don't want to say what I wrote because I'm superstitious, but he watches quietly smiling. I ask him if he's ready to order. He tells me he needs more time. He would love a water. As I started to walk away, he asked me to read my now folded paper. I say sure and laugh because I often have deep conversations with strangers. And he's been pretty flirty, so I figure it's some type of pickup line. Mind you, he told me to really think about it. When I wrote it, he says, "Are you sure that's it? No money?" Mind you, this man doesn't know what I wrote yet. I didn't write anything to do with money, only mental and emotional things. I turn the corner to the kitchen facing the one door. I pour his water still facing the door from the soda fountain. I'd be able to see him walk out with my peripheral. I walk fast back to the booth past that door, and no one's sitting in the booth, and my paper's gone. Still baffles me. Who or what was that? In your opinion, there's no way he snuck past me. So, no malevolence. If anything, at first I was upset because I wanted to get his number, because I felt like he was into me, and then I realized he literally disappeared and got genuinely freaked the fuck out. But also happy and smiley knowing that he wasn't human. Now, writing this sounds like some crazy stuff Odin would do, but he had both of his eyes. For the longest time, I thought maybe an angel, but I don't know if I even believe that anymore because I believe in spirit guides. Would they be able to manifest themselves into a human body? Alone in forest camping. I quite often camp alone in forests. Never been scared of it, but last time I was there, it was kind of really weird. Previous visits on that forest, there were other campers, but this time went Monday evening, so no one else was there. Soon as sun fully went down at around 1 a.m. Sun went down around 1 a.m. Oh, never mind. Soon as sun fully went down, around 1 a.m. and it was pitch black, I heard some branches cracking, but I ignored it totally. Like an hour later, I heard literal footsteps, so I went to look out everywhere with my flashlight, didn't see anything. So I went back to my campfire, ignored it again, and I just put some music louder to ignore the forest sounds. But sounds kept happening around 3 a.m., and it got weirder because I could hear branches cracking, like someone was walking out there. Not like an animal would move, or, well, if it was an animal, I would have seen it. It was on the right side, and then I turned there, and they came from the left of me. I looked there, nothing again from the position next the sound left me again. That's when it kind of got a little bit spooky, because I was hoping to find another human or traveler making those noises. There was nobody even close to me. Well, as a Finnish person, I kind of told him in my language. Oh boy, I cannot speak Finnish. Oh God. Oh God. Oh my God, I can't do it. Perkele Joset tuota oksien naksua tuola lopetanina pas. I can't do it. Which is kind of funny when I think it translates to, Devil, if you won't stop that branches cracking, I'm going to grab you from the nape. But Perkele or Perkela, I don't know how to do it. It's common used in curse words anyways here. After that sounds calmed down in some way, some minor sounds that could have been normal mouses. After that, my mind could explain as animals, but I still stayed up until sun rays up again, and it was totally silence. Whew. Actually, with some sunshine, because sounds never fully stop during dark time. But yeah, I don't get scared easily. I go on graveyard alone at 6 a.m. just to hear the same type of footsteps from the past lives, and I think I get along with somewhat. What? But again, I've been camping every year, and I do camp a lot, and this is literally the first time I heard noises that didn't come from animals either. I've been camping before in that literal same spot before, and that night there wasn't any noises. And that time there's only a few people camping, like 100 meters away from me. So I know differences what normal human sounds and what animal sounds in forest, but those sounds I heard can't explain. If it would have been fox, bear, lynx, wolf, I would have seen it. Smaller than those animals don't crack branches while they walk around. Indeed. Black Mass. I'm a 23-year-old male, and I've been reflecting on paranormal encounters I've experienced in my childhood. I've been wanting to express my experiences to others. I'll jump right into it. When I was 7 years old, my family bought a house in south central Pennsylvania. The house was brand new. It was built in 2007 and in a development by Ryan Homes. As fortunate as I was, I can still say without guilt, I didn't like this house, and still do not like this house. I'm glad to no longer live there. For a majority of my childhood, I felt as though I was being watched from a distance. It was always very uncomfortable for me, and as I always felt the need to retreat to my bedroom. I always felt like I was invading somebody or something else's space. By the time I was 12, I was pretty convinced that something else was inhabiting the house. Something I'd interpreted as hostile. I tried to convince myself my experiences all in my head. I had a fear of the dark, and I was aware of how that might influence my perception of these paranormal experiences. But the internal debate as to whether or not something was in the house continued. Besides feeling watched, there are various paranormal experiences which I will now describe. I'll only describe these couple for time's sake. My dad was in the military, was often stationed for very long periods of time. He was absent for most of my childhood. He'd return every now and then for a few months to a year or so before leaving again. When I was in the 8th grade, he had returned home momentarily. I had my neighborhood friends over and we were having a sleepover. There were 3 of us. We were sleeping in the living room, and of course, I was in the middle of the night, and I was the only one awake. I lay on the floor closest to the kitchen. I was just lying there, staring into the dark kitchen when I started hearing slow and heavy footsteps coming down the hallway. Honestly, getting spooked just writing about it. At first, I thought it was my dad. Then I quickly realized they were oddly slow and oddly heavy. I was anticipating seeing his silhouette as the moonlight cast just enough light into the kitchen for me to be able to see objects. As the footsteps exited the void of the hallway into the moonlit kitchen, I suddenly stopped breathing. I was in complete shock. I could hear footsteps but couldn't see any silhouette. Couldn't see any silhouette. They continued to approach me slowly, and I just lay there in fear. I was completely frozen. They continued to approach me before stopping about 8 feet away from me. They were standing directly across from me, but I lay there for several minutes waiting, but the footsteps never continued. I finally felt the courage and woke up my friends in a panic. The next incident proved to be the nail in the coffin, and confirmed to me what I was experiencing was, at the very least, tangible. I was about 15 years old. It was the midday of the daytime on a bright and beautiful summer day. I was home alone with my dog. Couldn't tell you what I wore that day, or what I ate, or who I spoke to, but I can tell you this. I stepped out of my bedroom, which was on the second floor, and walked over to the steps overlooking the foyer. I looked down to see my dog resting peacefully by the front door. I began to walk down the steps. I immediately noticed the space around me felt heavy, like someone had placed fans against the windows or orientated them so they were pushing air into the house. So quiet, very quiet. It had not occurred to me this might be something paranormal. In fact, I felt very relaxed. That feeling you get when you meditate. I walked down the steps and decided to lie on the floor and cuddle with her. She wasn't much of a cuddler, so it really wasn't unusual for her to pull away from me after a minute or so. Of course, I wanted to cuddle her for longer, so I pulled her back down to the floor, but it really wasn't me that she had a problem with. After pulling her down 2 more times, I gave up. I lay on the floor, I turned my head to look at her, and noticed that she was staring down the hallway with her ears up. She was clearly looking at something. I sat up and looked down the hallway with her, and all of a sudden she got up on all fours. The fur on the back of her went up, as did her tail, and then she started growling. This was extremely unusual behavior for her. She was a rescue dog and was severely abused as a puppy and was not verbal. While I found this unusual in the moment, I thought she might be overreacting to some stimuli that I couldn't hear or see. Maybe she thought kids playing outside were intruders in the house. Maybe she saw the reflection of a car driving by. She was a very sensitive dog, and doing so much as holding a ruler in your hand would scare her. But then I saw it. This black circular levitating mass darted across the hallway. Had I blinked, I might not have seen it. It's about the size of a beach ball. It was very dark. It didn't even scare me at first, and obviously I was shocked. But in that moment, I realized everything I felt was real. I mouthed the words, "No fucking way," as my jaw remained open. Not only did I see it in my direct vision on a clear and sunny day, my dog saw it too. I've told this story to my mother many times. She told me that when we first moved in, I told her I saw a black figure darting rapidly back and forth at the bottom of the stairs. I don't currently remember seeing this, but based on my age and the significance of this, I hope it'll soon come back to me. Apparently, I told her my grandfather wouldn't let it come up the stairs. I remember on several occasions I'd gone upstairs to the safety of my bedroom. After shutting my door behind me, I'd put my face up to the door and I'd say something along the lines of, "You can't come in here. This is my space. You can't come in here." I felt a little silly, as I could easily see how this might be an imagined fear, but this illustration is just to paint a picture of just how real this was for me. Hope you enjoyed reading about my experience or found it interesting. Well Digger's Story. My experience starts in New Mexico west of Clayton on 422. I was drilling for a small mom and pop company with a hydraulic rig which only took 2 people to operate. That was my younger brother and I. It was hot that summer and the rig would overheat during the day, so I told the boss man that we would drill at night. That way there'd be no issues. My little brother had the company truck and I had my personal vehicle, which is a 2003 Tahoe. I had my girlfriend with me at the time, so we agreed to meet at the job site after dark. We live about an hour away in Texas, and anyway you would pull off of 422 just after the road tees to another small town. I don't really know the name of it, but you'd have gotten open and closed at least 5 gates to get to the spot. When I got there, I fired up the rig and generator, turned on the lights to check the equipment every time. It was good, so I shut it back down and waited for my brother. I folded the back seats down and was going to try to sleep for a bit while my brother was headed out towards us, so me and my girlfriend jumped in the back of the Tahoe to get some shut-eye. I noticed how pitch black it was in this pasture. There was no moon, no stars, nothing, just darkness about this time. I see what looks like headlights at a good distance far enough away that it was just one light instead of two separate headlights, which seemed like they were heading our direction, but not from the direction we came on, from a different direction in the east of us. Puzzled, we watched this light come down what appeared to be country roads, still thinking it was headlights, but still never got close enough that it split into two separate lights, so it was pretty far away anyhow. We're sitting there watching it, our heads in the direction, and all of a sudden it does a spiral move and disappeared. It was like where you stand outside with your finger, drew a spiral in the air, but imagine it was 5 miles away seeing this. I knew it wasn't a car anymore. I look over at her and I asked, "Did you see that?" And she hugs me tightly as we talked about, trying to wrap our heads around it. She points at this red glow that's coming towards the truck slowly from the east. I was in a state of disbelief, sitting there, quietly trying to come up with any logical explanation for what this glowing red mist could be. I thought, like a brake light, or no brake pedal. It was clear if anything like that could press it and the rig and generator off. Looking around for anything solution, I look around and ask, "Are you seeing this? I'm just trying to understand this. I'm not tripping or nothing right now." She said, "No, this happening, let's out of here." So I said, "No, let's see what it wants about this." What is this? I said, "No, let's see what it wants about this time." That mist surrounded the back half of my Tahoe. Looking out the window seemed like looking through a red filter, but not just red, almost like an ultraviolet red filter without the black light. She said, "Let's go." I said, "Wait," trying to figure out what was happening. Then a knock on the rear passenger quarter panel scared the shit out of both of us. She screamed, which made me panic, so I turned around to start my truck. I couldn't find the key for a split second, but when I did, I put it in and turned the switch, but nothing happened, like the battery was dead. No light, no radio. Then a split second later, the engine would turn over, but still no lights. A second thud on the rear quarter and a truck turned on. Looked around. Everything was normal again. The headlights came on, but we left out of there right then, and I didn't drill that well. The boss man did. We ended up meeting my brother at one end of the many gates to get to the property. I tried to tell him what had happened, and he said something had hit his truck, but to brushed it off as a stick or something. I told my boss about it. He'd think it was drugs to this day. I still don't know what the hell it was, and I don't think it wants to harm us, because the whole thing just kind of happened. It didn't seem intended, like it just happened to be on its path, or wanted to see what the bright lights were in the middle of nowhere. I don't know. If anybody has any similar stories or any info, it would be awesome. I wanted to go back and check it out, but that's the first period. The first period was after. Wanted to go back and check it out, but period. Also didn't want to get shot by a rancher. I definitely understood that last sentence. Me neither. Freaky encounter in the hills last night. Yesterday night at around 12:45 or 1 a.m., myself and two buddies went up to Del Val to eat our Jack-in-the-Box and look at the stars. We initially turned left onto a side road to look to the view because I had never parked there. There were 3 cars and teenagers, so we decided to go a little bit further down into the empty main road. As I was U-turning out, the kids started to start their cars and leave. We turned left out of the side road onto the main road and pulled over to the next right to enjoy the peacefulness. We went out to go eat on the hood of the car, despite it being pretty chill out. Chilly. We started eating our food and chatting about life. We were finishing up, and when I heard what I thought was a weird humming or throat noise, I wasn't immediately startled because, well, I thought it could have been my buddy messing around, but maybe just trying to scare us. But I was confused at the same time because he was mid-sentence when the noise happened. I said, "What was that? Was that you?" He said, "Nah, it literally wasn't me." Sort of a scared laugh. I certainly wasn't off put yet, and we were kind of speculating and laughing about making jokes about wrong-term mutants, which we always like to do when we're in outdoors. My friend said, "Yeah, we don't fuck with that old DD. D-dog. Somebody educate me on this." Immediately after he said that, it happened again. We heard it much more clearly because nobody was talking this time. It sounded like a humanish agony groan that was no longer 3 seconds. It was definitely not my buddy. From our point of view, we're standing by the front of the car facing the passenger rear side where the road starts going down into a grassy hillside. The noise was almost certainly coming from the grass, and pretty close, enough to make me feel like I was in imminent danger. Fight or flight kicked in and we scrambled into the car, rolling all the windows up while my buddy collected the $30 bucks of Jack-in-the-Box from the hood, locked the doors, turned the car on, and put it into gear. We were driving down the road the opposite way. We just needed to get somewhere that we would have to do a U-turn soon. Not within 5 seconds of driving off, a police truck with his orange lights on passed us, heading into the direction of the noise and where we had just been parked. Pulled over not 30 yards away from where we were parked. He didn't pull out after us, so I ruled out him being suspicious of us. It's like he heard the same thing we did. We drove past by the spot where the kids were parked and we checked to see if there was still anybody there maybe messing with us. No cars. Maybe it was a homeless or mentally ill person roaming around the hills. In that split second of hearing the sound for the second time, my gut tells me it was some freaky creature watching us through the grass on all fours. And again, the noise sounded human, but not fully, maybe ghoulish or supernatural. I am religious. With good there must be evil. Certainly do not doubt that dark magic exists. Kinda bummed because it's a cool place to get away and enjoy the stars, but now I know if I want to go back. Maybe with a firearm, or maybe with more people. Dragged into a dark room. I was around 10 years old. My family used to go to bed at the same time, all 7 of us. We would say goodnight to each other from our bedrooms, and we were all tucked in. I know it wasn't even 5 minutes after all the lights were out when I had to get my last pee in before going to fall asleep. Got up out of bed, maybe making my way down the hall to our 2,000 square foot house. Feeling the wall as I walked, when the room on the right came, I knew the bathroom was on the left. The door came, and I felt a large hand grab my right ankle with a muscular force, drag me into the center of a small bedroom that was vacant. Screamed to the top of my lungs like bloody hell. My mom and stepdad rushed into the room to investigate the matter. I said somebody grabbed me. I was hysterical, barely able to word a sentence. My parents checked the locked window and the closet that didn't have any attic access, and the only odd thing about the room was the yin-yang symbol on the inside of the closet that was painted. Beneath it was a depressing note somebody had left about their life. My mom tried to scrub it illegible, but we bought the house and it wasn't completely successful.